Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. You are at The Artist in the Open Jar. We're so excited to have you here. I'm Jeff Whiting. I'm the founder of Open Jar Studios, and thanks so much for being here. This is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. When we opened Open Jar Studios almost 4 years ago, we opened just before the pandemic, but the studios were opened and dedicated to the creation of art and to the continued cultivation of the artist. And if you don't know the story of how we got the name of the Open Jar, I got the name from a study I once read about fleas. If you don't know this about fleas, fleas can jump across the room, which I find very disgusting. But there was a group of scientists who took a group of fleas, they put them in a jar, put the lid on the jar, and of course the fleas were trying to jump out. After about a week, the fleas learned to adjust the height of their jump. That way they wouldn't knock their brains out every time they jumped. Smart fleas, right? At the end of that week, they took the lid off of that jar, and what they discovered is that the fleas continued jumping at that same height. They never again tested the limitation of that jar. And when I read that study, I went, oh, that's me as an artist. You know, we hear no so much in our lives and in our careers. Sometimes we protect ourselves and we stop jumping with all of our might. And so I sort of adopted as my own personal philosophy, the open jar philosophy, meaning just jump as though there is no limitation. And so when we named the studios, we called it, for that reason, the Open Jar Studio. So there's no limits here. And we've been thrilled over the last 3 years to be home to rehearsals for lots of Broadway shows, Moulin Rouge, Funny Girl, tons of shows have been here, and most recently in New York. And we have what I think is a really unique opportunity here at the studios. We have the greatest artists working in the musical theater working here. And tonight we have a group of people who have agreed to come and really share their knowledge and help us in both parts of our mission. They're creating art, and they're going to help cultivate us. All of you here in the audience are young directors, choreographers, writers, creators in your own right. And so I think what a great opportunity to come. Here we are in the rehearsal room. New York is about to hit their technical rehearsals. And so these artists have been so gracious in giving of their time tonight and for us to be able to pick their brains a little bit. And so I would like to just introduce them. First, she's a renowned actor you've seen in films, The Bourne Legacy, Birdwatching. On stage, you've seen her in Richard III, The Scottsboro Boys, also as a playwright for her acclaimed play Feeding the Dragon. He is the book writer of some of the most iconic musicals known to man, Chicago, Steel Pier, World Goes Round, and The Scottsboro Boys. Please welcome the co-book writers of New York, Sharon Washington and David Thompson. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. The other part of our table that's coming, she is a 5-time Tony Award-winning director, choreographer, responsible for some of the most iconic musicals we know, including The Producers, Contact, Crazy for You, Showboat, Scottsboro Boys, and soon to be New York. He is also an icon in his own right, the composer responsible for some of the greatest works in the American theater, Kiss of the Spider Woman, Chicago, Scottsboro Boys, and Cabaret. Please welcome Susan Stroman and John Kander. Thank you.
Thank you. A bright light.
I know, we got some good lights for you. And thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is the busiest time right before you hit the stage of your brand new show, the most anticipated show of the season, New York. We're all very excited. So thank you so much for being with us.
Yes.
So tell us, what can we expect with New York? Somebody told me it's a love letter to New York.
Well, yes, it's a Valentine to New York City, and it takes place in 1946, and it goes through a year from 46 to 47. It's right after the war, when everyone in New York was hopeful, and coming back from the war in New York was filled with hope, and people were pulling plywood off of the storefronts, and they were getting smallpox vaccinations. Very similar to what New York is now very hopeful of coming through what we've all gone through. So there's the accessibility to this particular year for a contemporary audience, in fact. And New York is a real character in the piece. And we have essential characters, Francine and Jimmy, but we cross paths with many, many characters. And the reason, we celebrate New York is because of its diversity too, and we have that in all of our characters who cross paths. And, it is that idea of walking down New York City, take a right instead of a left, and you meet somebody who changes your life. And that happens in our show for all these characters who went crossing paths. And of course, it has the most incredible score by John Kander and Fred F. and Lin-Manuel Miranda. Yep. Yes, Lynn couldn't be here tonight because he's filming something.
Yeah, of course.
But he's been with us the whole time.
That's so exciting. So we're going to hear the music we know from the film and more. Is that true, John?
Well, the music is, yes. Freddie and I wrote a score for the film New York, New York, and we're using that and then adding some songs of Fred's and mine that really mostly never saw the light of day. What I wanted to add to what Susan was saying about New York City, particularly in that year after the war, was the place where everybody came to get the chance to become themselves. And some people get that opportunity and some people don't, but that's where you believed that you had a chance to be who you really are. And I still believe that about this city, with all of the terrible things that we read about in the paper and that really happen. I still think that this is the place of opportunity. And somebody's got to prove me wrong.
But it celebrates the resilience of New York. But as Kander says, people come here to change who they are, or they come here to become the best of what they can possibly be, because it's right here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever you start working on a musical, you're always the first question, and it's always a stupid question, but it's an important one. Is so, what do these characters all want? Why are we telling this story? And it was funny when we started the project. It was very evident very quickly when we looked at Fred's lyric to the song "New York, New York," exactly what every character wants, because it's what everybody in this room wants. It's you want to be a part of it. You want to do something, and you want to make it happen for yourself. So suddenly that was something that not only was universal, but it was all to everybody, but it was also so important to the characters themselves. And when you have that kind of passion for something that you want so much, suddenly you've got a big story, and it can and it's something that will always be a part of this city.
And how did this come about? This idea, of course, I assume inspired by the film, but who came to you and said, "Let's do this as a musical"? How did that?
Well, no, because sometimes when you do a musical, it's because someone's handed you a novel or a screenplay of something, or you have an image of a girl in a yellow dress or something. But in this case, Kander and Tommy and I have worked together, and we just wanted to be together. We wanted to collaborate together. So it was sitting around a table and saying, what can we possibly do? What can we do? And the idea of the film New York, New York came up, and no one had seen it for like 30 years. No one had seen it. So we decided to
Gosh, it was a very fun
watch
night.
it. And the thing is, and go on, yes, and the thing is, we realized that what we really wanted were the Kander and Ebb tunes, but we needed to create a show that was really celebrating New York and celebrating all the people in New York. And so, but we had to get the rights to that movie. And we approached a wonderful producer, Sonia Friedman, to see if she might want to be a part of it. And she did, and she went out and got the rights. But once we got the rights, and we had to tell the movie people that we needed to write our own story. And then we brought in Sharon because this collaboration is so wonderful because Sharon was in the Scottsboro Boys for us. We became very good friends. And she's not only an incredible actress, but she's a wonderful writer. We saw Feeding the Dragon off Broadway. And then Kander and Lynn are very good friends. They live next to each other in the country. He's always coming over for bagels. That's what I hear.
A little bit.
Anyway, so we had this natural collaboration started to begin. And so we started the show really kind of right at the pandemic time, and then continued like on Zoom and such, and kept going. But it's like a year ago from now, we did a workshop. And when we did that workshop, we realized we had something special. And and now since that workshop, it was always now constantly tweaking and working and writing.
And you put together an amazing team. I had a front row seat to the Scottsboro Boys. Everybody at this table was involved, and it was a life-changing experience.
Front row seat.
Oh, yeah.
You were the star. He could play.
That's right.
We had all the chairs and all the
That's
chairs
right.
moving
That's
around.
That was a great honor, and a show that really changed my life for sure. I wanted to ask Sharon, so
Yes.
when you got the call, would you like to be in a Susan Stroman musical? Were you expecting that call
The Scottsboro Boys?
for Scottsboro Boys?
I laughed. I just burst at my age and said, so we got a call. I want to see you for this new musical, Scottsboro Boys. I laughed, and then they said, "You don't sing. You won't have to sing. You won't have to dance. And you don't really talk." And I thought, and I want to do this. Why? I said, I don't know, Susan Stroman, John Kander, Tommy Ted. It's kind of. So I went in and just absolutely fell in love with this team, and it really was the first time I got agency to create. I felt like a creator with the lady because it really was something we crafted together. And so it really was the germ of, this is a different way of performing for me. And it opened a different world for me. So I think there's a direct correlation between that and me wanting to write my own story and now here. So.
Yeah, amazing. And talk to us, how is it co-writing together? How is that? We're all of us in this room are creators. I'm curious, if you're used to writing on your own, how do you do that process?
I think we make, and I'll let Tommy talk more about this, but I think we make a really good pair because we have different strengths and we complement each other really well. I have a pretty good ear for dialogue and characters because that comes out of my acting work. And so we can write something and I can read it and I have that's not quite falling off of my tongue the way, I don't know. And then we go in and we talk about it. Yeah. And so we really complement each other really well.
That's exactly right. I have to say that the basis of this everything we've done, and I'm sure that everybody works this way in their own way, is the collaboration. So, we collaborate, every department works together. So you're not really ever alone because as much as you're writing a script or a story or a character, you're working, with Kander because it has to be represented in music because it's really the music people come to see at a musical. And then of course with Stro because it's how it gets on its feet and how it then becomes alive. Because, as writers, you can write something and you think it's brilliant or you put in a stage direction that you think is so important and then, it has no value until the director gets it and works it with the actors. So it's all about that collaboration, and it's the same thing working with Sharon because you put an idea on the table. Is it the right idea? I don't know. Let's try it, and you play it and you play with it until you feel like it's right, and then you take it to the next part of the team. But it always comes back to that.
I think this team really, I've seen you all be such great collaborators, and that's what I think this discussion is. Because you can't really teach or study in a book about collaborating.
Well, Kander, talk about that, because you talk all about, when you're faced with a problem, sometimes that's the most, I wouldn't say fun, but it's what makes you do what you do.
I think collaboration is first place. It's the key to music theater, and whether it's opera or musical comedy or whatever. I also think that collaboration for some people is really difficult because it means not giving up your feelings and giving up your point of view, but it means actually sharing creative power, if you will. I think it's a swell time. I really do. And I think if you don't, this sounds stupid. If you don't like collaboration, you should not do this. Because I've seen, we all have, friends of ours get into projects. It's hard at always to make a piece of theater work. It's always difficult and it's chancy. But if you don't have a group of people who are all seeing things the same way, who respect and care for each other, and don't have a good time, it's doomed. We're here because we like to do it. There's no defense for this habit that we have, except for the fact that I love to go over to her house and eat cookies and talk.
That's true.
That's really true.
Gonna get the cookies.
It's all white.
It is a
Which
beautiful
is
studio.
purifying, if anything.
Well, yeah, it's a space that just has white walls and a white table. Just because I can't have any show posters or like I can't have a show poster or something up there thinking, well, what went wrong there? Because all of a sudden your brain would go to that poster. So there's nothing on the walls. It's all clear and just so you can come in. Has a big piano, has some mirrors and
a refrigerator.
And a refrigerator. That's it.
But it's fun. I have to say, though, every project starts pretty much the same way. You just start talking and you come up with the idea, and the idea could be one time we did an idea and Stro just said, what do you think of this title? And we did Beast in the Jungle, and there wasn't anything more than just a title. Sometimes it's an idea that New York was just a concept, but it triggers a conversation, and it's just, how can you tell the story? What if we have the characters doing, and it goes on and on and on, and there's no magic there's no mystery to it. It's just a conversation about how do you bring things to life in a story that you want to tell.
And you mentioned what if. I know that's a big thing you talk about a lot, John. Just bringing what if ideas to the table.
What if is the operative phrase, and you have to be I promise you, the living example of somebody who makes a fool of himself 20 times in an hour. But maybe that 21st what if that I come up with might be a pretty good idea. I think this was true in my collaboration with Fred Abb too. We wrote fast, and we had a lot of ideas that we exploited, that we did fast, and a lot of what we wrote was really crap. And you have to not be afraid to make a fool of yourself in order to find that little thing which is actually true. I don't know if I'm making any sense by this, but I've always felt a little suspicious of creative artists who suffer. And I don't mean that unsympathetically, but it seems to me making stuff, I've found myself saying this a lot. One of the greatest joys in this life is making art with your friends. And I've been really, really lucky to have been able to do that all these years. And this table is the perfect example of it. That's the end of my speech.
But I think what we learned from Kander and Ed when we first worked with them too is that there is no bad idea. You have to throw every idea on the table, and it might end up being a bad idea, but someone else would pick that idea up and turn it into gold. So you have to create an environment where people will be able to throw a bad idea down. You can't have any egos. All egos have to stay outside. It has to be, everybody is very, very equal at this collaborative table of all the departments.
And I just want to, as the newest member of the collaborative team, I have to say that working with these legends and being invited into this room, the room is a safe room. And that's ultimately where you can throw out your ideas and not feel like you're going to be ridiculed or you're going to be, oh, that's wrong. It's just, maybe that's not right for now, but it's such a safe room. And I had to learn coming into this to be, because I'd be thinking things and I think, oh, that's kind of, second guessing myself. But I'm telling you, the room is that room where you feel like, well, it might be the stupidest thing in the world, but I'm going to say it. And sometimes it's not. So I think that's really, the safety of the room is really important in all art, in all creation.
Yes, that's very true. Talk to me a bit about you all are legends in the thing that you do.
That seems really weird.
It's true. Am I not right, audience?
No.
You are a legend. You are the greatest. Now, in terms of you collaborate together, and yet you each do a different thing. John, you put your fingers on the keys and you play, and Stro, I remember you explained it to me once. You sort of see cartoon people in your head doing that. Tell us about how do you first imagine the idea?
Well, no, I mean, no matter what kind of music I hear, I visualize it. So even when I was a little kid, if it was classical or rock and roll or an old standard, I can see people dancing. I could see what they're wearing. I have this sort of animated mind of movement and music. So I visualize music. But this one too, he visualizes. I'll say to him, I imagine a girl walking down the beach and she sees a man and they fall in love, and he goes, and in Beast in the Jungle, he did that. So whatever I said to you, all of a sudden it came out of your fingers onto the keyboard. So you're very visual too in playing your music. You understand that this is going to happen. I need them to go across stage here, but then a big unit's going to come on. So then you modulate. So you're very visual too. So
when she explains that idea, do you hear something in your head before you put your fingers on the keys?
No, I don't know what my fingers do.
Yeah, that's true. They just, it's like a magic comes out.
I have this dumb theory that if I put my hands on the keyboard, they will do something. and the important thing is not to let my brain get in the way. But you're wrong about me being visual. I wish I were visual. But what I am interested in musically is story, mood, atmosphere, and that's always been true. And so when you say to me, this is going to happen, then somehow or other I try to translate that feeling into something musical. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
But I think it's a good point, because the story is always the most important thing. And it always goes back to the story, what the music is saying, telling the story, what the dance is saying with the story, what the dialogue is. It's always, that is at the end of it, you have to tell that story. And every department has to tell the story. The sets, the lights, the costumes are reinforcing the story.
And John, you said the word atmosphere, create an atmosphere. Some of the vamps you have created create an atmosphere.
I guess so, but I've never in my life thought about it. No, truly.
Yeah, but it does.
I've never sat down and said, now I've got to create it.
Right. Yeah. Can you tell us about how that song was created?
New York,
What-
New York.
New York, New York.
You want me to tell that wwhole long story?
Sure. Yeah, we're about to see the musical. We'd love to know how did that song originate?
All right, this
Because this wasn't the original
this gets
song.
really boring stuff. Freddie and I were hired to write the score, so about a whole bunch of songs for a movie called New York, New York, that Martin Scorsese directed and Liza Minnelli and Robert De Niro were in. And we went down, we wrote our 6 songs and went down and presented them to Scorsese and Liza and De Niro. And one of the songs was a song called New York, New York. they were really sweet about it and made us feel that we had done a good job, except for De Niro, who said, we never actually met him. He was in a couch over on the side, and we just saw this arm go up. And Scorsese said, excuse me, and he went over to talk to De Niro, and then it sort of very animated conversation. And what had happened was that Liza had a song called The World Goes Round, which was identified with her in the movie. And he was connected with a song called New York, New York. And Scorsese came back and in a very embarrassed way said that De Niro felt that his song was weaker than hers. And that it threw the story off balance anyway. And then he said in a very embarrassed, sweet way, would you two guys mind going back and taking another shot at a song called New York, New York? And we were very polite and just only a slight bit huffy. And so we said we would do that. And then driving back, cabbing back to Fred's apartment, we were filled with some actor is going to tell us how to write a song. And so we got to Fred's, and in 45 minutes we wrote another song called New York, New York, which is the song you know now. And inside that song, there's a certain kind of energy which I can only call anger. Anyhow, we brought the song back, and they liked it a lot. And the reality of it is, the first song we wrote was so terrible. I cannot tell you how embarrassing it is to be connected with that. It found its way into the underscore.
It's in this show.
Of this show, but I was
Yes, it's hidden. There are a lot of Kander and Easter eggs in this show, and that's one of them.
Oh, that's cool.
What I really want to do is say, not by me.
But it is funny.
Anyway, the point is, if it hadn't been for De Niro, we would never have written the song, which is now called New York, New
Which
York.
is the anthem of New York City, you know. Yeah, that song's gone to some other universe, some other level. But in fact, this show is really inspired by that song and by Fred's lyrics about if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere, be a part of it, rather than the movie. It's really, that's what propelled us into writing the show, is that song. So I guess we have to thank De Niro too.
Yes. Now, I want to turn this question to you. So John puts his fingers on the keys. Stro sees images in the mind. How does it begin? How does it begin as you're plotting it out?
Always a deadline.
A deadline.
Always a deadline. It's a deadline, and after that, there's a deadline. No, the good thing about writing in a collaboration is you know that you have to show up with some ideas, and pretty quickly, you know, because unless you can get your story going, you can't. You have to show up with the story first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's just about the invention of it. I have to say that it's like anything. Sometimes there's a roadmap that you can follow because there's a source material. That can be very helpful, or you abandon the source material like we have and you just start invention and you...
Well, you invented all the characters.
It starts with the characters. There's so many characters. And Kander said early on, what will make this interesting is not the central love story that we'll know that that's a great story to follow and that will have its own energy, but find ways to tell the story with all sorts of different secondary characters. And secondary isn't even the right term, just additional characters. So, and rightly, that was like, we haven't seen that on a stage before, because usually when you do a musical, you're seeing, there's the lead couple and then there's the comedy couple and then there's an old aunt. You know, so you know what I mean. Yeah. So it's like, let's make this world. So we started building out secondary characters, just reams and reams and reams and reams of them. Some of them were based on real people. Some of them were based on stories that Kander would tell about old landladies or about his first days in New York?
I'm really old, so I've met a lot of people.
But what was also really lovely for me in this process, which makes it even more personal, is that my family is born and raised, my mother's side of the family are New Yorkers, and Tommy's going to love that I say that. Someone in my family has lived on the island of Manhattan since 1835, and I have never seen that. And so this opportunity to tell those stories, of my family stories, of the neighbors that I saw, my father's neighbors, I'd like to go into my family, is really exciting. So that's been a real treat, and to bring the New York that I know. And that is the tapestry of stories. And what I was so excited about was the layers, because not only are we telling the central story and, for lack of a better term, the secondary characters, but there are also characters on the fire escapes. And there's somebody walking, Stro has these beautiful montages, we call, of people just moving through the city, because to me, that's New York. It's the layers, right? So you look at the city and you're like, well, what's that guy doing on that fire escape? So that's what's really exciting about this story to me.
That is so cool. So cool. I want to just briefly touch on, you all come with a plan. You've worked on what you're going to do. And to me, I think the most exciting part of, it's been said, rehearsal is the best part. I would change that slightly to say pre-production is the best part. And I've been lucky to be in pre-production with you on many shows. And I know you come in with a plan. So we take those pre-production weeks and come up with a plan. But what I love about your process is that you've got a plan, but you come into the rehearsal room, and that doesn't have to be the plan. That could be the backup plan. Has that been true for New York, New York?
Sure.
Too?
I mean, we did 2 weeks of pre-production, and so I do come in with a plan for everything. However, I don't necessarily share that with the actors, because I want them to feel very much part of the creation. It's almost like you want to build a net for people to fall into if they go the wrong way or something. So you have this plan, but you want everybody to feel part of creating. So you just start, and if someone heads down that wrong path, you can bring them back because you did your homework. And you can say, no, what if we tried it this way and went that way? But yeah, the pre-production helps you do that, to really talk through it. And everybody's in pre-production. And the drummer's in pre-production, everybody. So it's all worked out. And that pre-production also informs you with your sets and your costumes and your lights about, the rest of your team. And and going in with a plan and then being open to create is going to give you your best result.
It's amazing. I want to just ask each of you, if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, this might be helpful for us who are here. What advice would you go back if you could just whisper in your ear something that might help you as a creator?
Mine would be, not to be afraid to ask the question, not to be afraid, because the worst thing that can happen is someone says no, but not be afraid to knock on Kander and Eb's door when you were very, very young to say, hey, can I have one of your shows to take down to the Vineyard Theater? And they said yes. And this was, we were very, very young. And
oh my gosh, I had
Tommy
brown
Thompson
hair. It was like almost 40 years ago.
Almost 40 years ago.
But what Stro's saying is so true. We showed up at their door with Scott Ellis, and it was one of those. I remember what I was wearing. I remember the moment. I remember the time. I remember everything. And it was like knocking on a door and actually thinking, well, this is the stupidest thing I have ever done, because I had never written anything, and none of us had done anything, but there we were. We knocked on the door, and Fred let us in, and you were there.
Did I have this shirt on?
You had that shirt on. And they said, when can we get to work? Yeah. So, and it was an incredible thing. But what you're saying is right, though. It's just
not being afraid to ask, the question, because the worst thing that can happen is somebody says no. But if you have an idea and you want to approach a collaborator, or you have an idea and you want to try to get the rights for something, it's that. It's go ask. I mean, I happened to be in London, and I called Sonia Friedman, the producer, and she didn't know me, but I was over there doing something, and I said, "Could you meet me for a coffee?" And she said yes. So I said to her, "New York, New York," and she was like, "What?" But we took that chance to ask this particular producer, and she jumped on board right away, and she got the rights for us, and we were off and running. But it's and if she had said no, we would have tried somebody else or tried something else. But you need to put yourself out there. If you think you are really meant to be in this business or really meant to create, you actually have to create it yourself. You can't wait for the phone to ring. No one is going to call you. You have got to go out and create it. You've got to find, if this is what you do, if you want to be creators, whatever your role is, you need to go find someone who writes a book or find someone who writes music, find someone who choreographs. Whatever your idea is, go out and make it happen.
I think that's so true. I think there's a lot of feeling that sometimes that there's an agent out there who has a project, or that there's a theater that's going to. None of that's. I mean, I have to say there hasn't ever been a project I think any has ever done where somebody has actually come in and really said, "This is all for you." It's the project you can invent, and then the project that you have to nurture. And nurturing that project is, we all know, it's late nights, it's crazy, it keeps you up. But that's, as you're saying, if you feel like that's what you need to do, that's sustaining enough sometimes. Not always, but sometimes.
I would say to my younger self, not be afraid to go to the scary places. Because as artists, scary is where the art lives, right? In those places that you're fearful of. Oh, I don't know if I can write. Been an actor for 30 years. Oh, that's a whole other thing over there. I can't write. But just don't stay in your little boxes that people like to put you in. Step out of your box. And it is scary. And there is an edge where you just think, what am I doing? I know this other thing. I don't know this thing. But I wouldn't be sitting here and it's not easy, and it will keep you up, and it will make you sick, and all of those things. But on the other side of that is something really special.
That's great advice.
Kander, come on.
Kander,
what about
advice?
I think if I had advice for myself when I was a kid, or for somebody who wants to be an artist in any form, it would be not to concentrate on what you think the experience of making art is going to give you, but to find some joy in the process. We are not romantic heroes and heroines. We are craftsmen. I think in some ways it's like trying to be a good carpenter. And sometimes you make a particularly beautiful chair, and sometimes you make an ordinary chair nobody wants to sit in. But the experience that you have of your own craft had better bring you joy. I always, there are certain great artists that inspire me in terms of the way they lived. I think George Balanchine is like the perfect example of when he was running the City Ballet, he would have 5 new ballets to put out there for a season. And he did, and 4 of them would be so ordinary that you never wanted to see them again, and one of them would be the Firebird. And I think you have to, if you just let yourself have that experience and have the joy of creation, because it is the same. Sometimes it's just as much fun to write something really crappy as it is to write something which turns out to be very successful. It's the process. My favorite thing about production is what takes place in this room, when everything is possible, when you have a bunch of really talented actors and wonderful collaborators, and you can sit around and say, what if? Everything is possible. I would stay here for years.
In a studio, in the open jar studio.
Yeah.
Well, but
We'll
in
take
this
you.
place, holy smoke. Once we actually get into the theater or open, God forbid, it's over. The experience is over, and it's the experience that I love. And I think for most people, whether they admit it or not, it's those days of creativity, even though sometimes, as Sharon said, it can keep you up all night. It's the collaboration, it's the what-ifness, it's it's trying something and really failing and fixing it. It's coming up with 10 dumb ideas and one really wonderful one. That's really fun. And it's a really nice way to spend your life if you can afford it.
Yeah.
And that's all I have to say on the subject.
So I think in tapping into that too, because of what we do, we can't really say something wasn't a success. It might have not been a financial success, but every show we've all worked on has been an artistic success. So in our world, when you say, oh, that was a flop, but it would not have been a flop for us working on it. It's a flop maybe for the producer. But for us, the process and the art of it, that's where the success is, not so much what is on the other end.
I'd love to, if you're willing to shift to some audience questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Great, go for it.
Hi there, my name is Sophie, and I'm an emerging director in the city. And the question I had was, were there any sort of unique challenges that you faced as a team taking the show to Broadway without doing an out-of-town tryout or like an off-Broadway production? And if there were, how did you overcome that?
Well, I think a lot of times we are able to take a show out of town. But this show is unique because it's called New York, New York. So even our producer felt we should just do it here. But as I said a year ago, we had a big workshop to see. That was kind of our out of town. But in reality, it is probably better to go out of town because you get to deal with audiences and such. But for this particular show, we've all felt we should just stay in New York to do New York, New York. But there's been no challenges to that, and that workshop was a real juicy workshop in the sense we tried many, many things. And we had audiences come in that last week to get feedback, so the room was filled with, 70 people every day or whatever. So that was sort of our way of going out of town. But this is a unique show. So that's how we ended up just staying right here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who's up next? Jake?
Hi, how's it going? Jake Corcoran, dancer, choreographer. My question is for Stro. You've obviously worked with like so many amazing and talented artists in your lifetime, and it's been great to kind of hear about each of your processes. How would you say that like you maintain your artistic process while collaborating with everyone, while kind of giving everyone their own space to do their process, while kind of maintaining that unified front?
Well, I think that's the thing. What we were talking about is it is no other art form like it. It's very collaborative. It is you having to listen to everyone's thoughts and everyone's ideas, and being unified with the entire team. Even our set designer, Beowulf, came in, has done the set 3 different times to support this story. So it's allowing them the freedom to create, but in the end, it has to be this one giant vision that we're all on board for. So you have to be clear what this one giant vision is, and then it's letting everyone create. That's the thing that, and I will say too, the more as a director and choreographer you know about lighting and set design and costume and sound, the better off your own work's going to be. Because I can make the most beautiful dance step in the world, the most perfect dance step, but if it's not lit right, it won't matter. Or the most beautiful dance step in the world, if it's in the wrong costume, it will not matter. So you have to know more about everybody else's job, in a sense, to make your own work better. You know, he could make the most beautiful tune in the world, but if we can't get that tune to support the choreography, it won't matter. So it's knowing, you know, and these two trying to get a joke out of these two. I'm kidding.
Not.
No, she's not.
No, but you know, it's knowing rhythm. I think when Sharon tapped on it a bit, we'll talk about, because she's such an incredible actress, she knows about rhythm. She knows about how to speak. She has great command of the language, which helps in all of our dialogue, you know. But the more you know about everything, the better off your own work is going to be.
To add to that, I think to work in a collaboration means that you have to like to hear other people's comments and opinions. And if you feel that only you should prevail, then you shouldn't be in it. And I've seen plenty of situations in projects, the people that we know who, in collaborations where there was so much ego rattling, and that the show would really didn't have a chance. It has to be the piece which matters.
Very cool. Thank you. Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Hughes. I'm a director choreographer, and I just started a theater company, so I'm really excited to be here. Yeah. Oh, thank you. My question is for Susan Stroman. What is your creative process when developing the movement for a show?
That's interesting, because you have to know what the characters are. You have to understand the characters, because they all would move in a different way. Like going back to the producers, Max Bialystock would move in a very different way than Leo Bloom. So Leo Bloom would be a little softer, a little coy, a little shy, and Max would be like a truck driver, you know. So when you choreograph, you have to be that character in a way to make it believable that someone launches into song and dance. In the end, you have to make it, doesn't have to be true, but it has to be believable that this person would launch into song and dance, and it has to come out of their character. Also, you know, surrounding yourself, if a prop is appropriate, you know, if I was doing a dance with a moderator, he might have index cards in his hands, or, you know, to reinforce that character, you know. But the process for New York in particular was the kind of humanity that crosses all the time. So there are variations on what you might call walking steps or running steps or dodging steps of people going through New York City. But there are also characters that will be more appropriate for them to do the salsa. There are characters that are more appropriate for them to be lovers doing more balletic piece. You know, and then there are construction workers that do rhythm on steel beams. So that would be more like tap dancers. So it's choreographing always to character. And that's what makes what we do different from Balanchine or the ballet, where you're choreographing for a specific man. Whereas in the ballet, it's for every man. It's more abstract, you know. But in fact, I've done some ballets for big companies, but which I've loved doing because of the talent. I mean, they're extraordinary. But in the end, I am a storyteller like my colleagues here, and it's all about telling story. And so it's characters. So therefore, it's making them move what's appropriate to their character.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Michael, the booking manager here at Open Jar Studios. First, I want to say thank you all for doing this. It's been a dream having you all here. I know, John, you said the other day it feels like you live here, but it's shows like this and artists like you that really make me want to come to work every day. So thank you. But when I'm not here, I'm building a career as a composer-lyricist. And so my question's for John. You know, you're most known for your long collaboration with Fred Ebb, but since then you've written with Rupert Holmes and Greg Pierce and Lin-Manuel Miranda. But there's also John Kander, the lyricist, that we don't hear about very often. So my question is, have you been writing lyrics, going back to your A Family Affair? Have you been writing lyrics since that first
I've
Broadway
been writing
show?
lyrics since I was in grade school.
Really? Since you were in grade school?
You can't help yourself. It doesn't mean they're any good.
And what's your process like as when you're working as John Kander, the lyricist, versus John Kander, the composer, or is it one sort of thing?
I think it's the same. I think it's trying to do something that's true. I'm not very clever, so so I don't write clever songs, lyrics. But I can write. I have found lyrics which are honest and true, and the fun of doing that, if you're doing it both things yourself, is that the music and the words come kind of at the same time. At least the thoughts do. And you can feel very good at the end of it if you succeeded in saying what you intended to. I don't know if that makes any sense. So if there's any difference in process, actually working with Fred was kind of like writing your own lyrics in this sense. I can improvise at a keyboard with real ease. The keyboard's been my friend since I was 4. Freddie could do the same thing with words. And that was an extraordinary talent that he had, so that when we went to work, we were very different people, but when we went to work in that room, we became a thing. And Freddie could improvise in rhyme and meter the way that I could improvise at a keyboard, so that very often what we wrote, the words and the music basically came at the same time, like out of one twisted brain.
What a remarkable twisted brain that is.
And that's rare. And I was really fortunate to have experienced that for so many years. And I watched, particularly when I watch a lot of my friends, talented friends who didn't get to have that experience. So I'm not mad at you tonight, Freddie. It was a gorgeous experience, and I was very lucky to have it.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Billy D. I'm a director, choreographer, and also a performer. My question is for anybody who wants to answer. When you're in the development stages and you sort of get that feeling that something's not working, how do you pinpoint what area needs to change or what element is best going to have the solution?
I'll let you two take this.
Well, sometimes it's if it's in the writing. Sometimes the structure is I always find the most important thing, just so that you know where you're going and how you're moving, but not necessarily what you're writing, so that you just have a bigger idea. Sometimes when things start falling apart, it's because the problem is many, many, many segments earlier. If you're writing a larger piece, you can find that it's the reason why this scene or this line or this joke isn't landing. It could be all the way back here, or that this moment is getting smothered. It's something structural that's kind of messing you up. But other than that, there's no. You just look at it and you actually never know. You really never know. But you get a feeling though if something's not going to work, and then you throw it out. And you just throw it out and you just come up with another idea. I don't know what.
Yeah, and I also think yes, and it also goes back to the basic questions of, for me, it's characters. Like, what does this character want? Tommy and I always talk about intention. What are if it gets all like messed? It's like what was the original intention? What is the character moving towards? What does this character want? It's like going back to that basic, and you let all that other stuff fall away, and then you can find that sort of true north of, okay, we're going this way. So we got kind of messed up here because we just took a turn here. And so it's just, then you restructure it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Billy D.
Hi, I'm Janine Molinari, and I'm artistic director of a company called Dance Molinari, based here at Open Jar, that trains the under 18 crowd on Broadway. And my question is for Susan. When you first start developing your team and bringing your team together, what is the earliest process that you do with your team?
Well, it's probably writing. It's probably what's the writers, And that's the first process, is sitting around a table and for this particular time, it was, what are we going to do? You just want to eat cookies in my place. But we wanted to be together. We wanted to collaborate together. And so it was trying to find an idea which we could keep meeting and collaborating, because we love the art of it, collaboration. But so the earliest is really tossing about ideas about what we could possibly come up with. And then the story is very important. So as I said before, the story in every department is important. So the very first early part of the process is, what is that story? And answering the question, why should we tell it? Why would we tell this story? Why would we do this story? Because there are a lot of stories out there, but why did we pick this particular story? And actually going back and forth and seeing if it's the right idea. We've had a couple ideas that we never made it out of the cookie tray. Yeah, but that's the first thing, and it's hooking into something we feel is going to something to give to an audience, to make them think.
Let me ask a question. Okay. It's in relation to what you said. No, I'm asking a question. I don't know the answer to it, of asking all of us. What makes an idea a good idea?
Well, I don't think you know. I don't think you know. Good to who? I mean, I don't know.
No, I know good for you as a creative.
Oh, as a creative, yeah. Well, I think it's something that you see. You can. For me, it'd be something I can visualize right away. That I could put on stage. For me, visually.
And for me, it would be connecting to the story. Yeah. Something about the
your
story.
Personal connection to
it always sort of starts with the personal. You start with that personal, and I can see that, and then I can see that, and then it starts branching out from there, I guess.
Tommy?
I think a lot of it has to do with when you just sit down and you start throwing the ideas around, where do they start getting interesting? But what I have to say, though, the one thing that Stro does that I don't think a lot of directors do is get into the process at the day one, at the start of the idea. So a lot of times directors will come in at the very end, or the writers will have developed a script or a musical. That's a big difference. I have to say that, Sharon, Kander, and I could have written New York, and we would have finished it, and we would have been all proud of it, and we would have walked in, and we would have knocked on your door, and we would have said, here's the script. Because that's the way a lot of directors get their material, because the stuff is finished, and then it gets shopped to directors. But what happens is the director hasn't been there since the first day, and suddenly the script has to come out of that director's mind, just like you're talking about. And then suddenly it's not, that script is not going to necessarily be there. So to add on what you're saying, I think it is important for directors to get involved immediately with the project from the day that it starts and stay with it, and don't do the thing where they're always sort of elbowing the writers to come back and impress them, that everybody is part of that process. Because I think we've all had that experience that directors will say, bring me your script when you're done, and then I'll tell you if I like it. Forget it. It's too hard to do, because you're inventing stuff that, we might think, this is going to look incredible. You wrote a musical where the San Francisco earthquake happened.
Yes.
But I think, though, that
that in a funny way is, Why is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Okay.
Well, I don't think it's a good. Listen, we've had some even Scottsboro boys. If we were to tell anybody what the idea was, you'd say, "Well, really, that's kind of a crazy idea." But I do. But just to finish that thought, I think that more directors should feel like they're part of that process with the writers from the beginning, and that everybody is always moving with the same intention.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Megan Beasy. I'm a performer and a writer, and my question is for Mr. Kander. How do you hope that we as artists carry on your legacy, and what do you hope that we impart to the coming generations of artists?
I just want you to have a good time. No, I mean that with my whole heart. I was fortunately or unfortunately brought up in a family that said if you weren't having a good time, you should try to do something about it. If making art makes you happy, nobody should be allowed to take that joy away from you. And it is not about what you read in the newspaper about yourself. It is what happens when you do it. I mean, we are very lucky people at this table because we've had some recognition, but that's not what the joy is about. When I said nothing is one of the greatest pleasures in your whole life that's available is making art with your friends. I meant that. I have written 16 musicals, and I would say 12 of them have gotten bad reviews. It can't be about recognition. It has to be about what's fulfilling for you. Is that an answer to your question?
Absolutely. It's an excellent answer. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you all. This has been very inspiring. My name is Tizlorn Bowie. I'm a director, choreographer, and creator. And my question is for Ms. Stroman. What advice would you give to a dancer transitioning into choreography, directing, and just creating their own work?
Well, yes, creating your own work. That's the thing. I tapped into it before about if you have an idea, you should try to develop it and an idea and bring in a composer, a lyricist, or bring in a writer and try to make something of it. It's creating it yourself. It's pushing yourself forward. And having an idea is one thing, but if you don't do anything about it, nothing's going to happen. You have to go out there and make it happen. The other thing I always think is, our good friend Lynn says to be in the room where it happens. If there's a way for you to get in that room to witness and be a part of watching how, listen, it's a miracle a musical gets up. It's a miracle. But to watch the process of it can only help your own process, to see how others have done it, whether they succeed at making it a financial success or not. But you would see how a process is done. I know my union, the Directors and Choreographers Union, has an observership where you can apply and they will place you on a Broadway show to observe a Broadway show. And that would be something very good to do. We have a gal, Claudia, on this, who came from that. Every show I've done for the last 25 years, I've had an observer. And they've gone on to become directors and choreographers. But it's trying to get in that room, too, to try to really understand what collaboration is and what the process is. And then if you have an idea, push it forward somehow.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Well, speaking of being in the room where it happens, thank you for letting us in this room. Thank you, audience, for being here. Thanks so much.